Your work as a fantasy hockey GM never stops, and that's why you're tapped right back into your daily source for fantasy hockey news, the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast, Monday edition, breaking down the latest out of the Stanley Cup final, and of course, all the rumors from around the league. Let's get this paper.
You're Locked On Fantasy Hockey, your daily podcast on fantasy hockey.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We back. It's Monday, baby, and you're tapped into the latest episode of the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast. Gotta show some love to the everydayers. Shout out to everybody holding us down, making us your first listen every single day. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel Sportsbook. Make sure you're checking out FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. My friend, Mr. Roden, it's been a little bit of a busy couple of days for us, but we're not sleeping on what's going on around the NHL, and we're not just talking about the Stanley Cup final, which, of course, we're going to get to on today's episode. This McDavid magic, it's getting seriously impressive. And I know it's only one game, and yes, I want to talk to you about what you think the rest of this series holds, if there's much of it anyway. McDavid needs to be discussed, but we're also going to take a look at the Toronto Maple Leafs today, Steele. Why not? It's the team you and I are closest to. That's our squad. For whatever reason, we still support them. But there's a lot going on with this squad, and all of it is fantasy relevant, because whatever you want to say about the Leafs, and yeah, we're going to get to the Conn Smythe, we're going to get to everything on today's show. They're still going to score a ton of goals next year, and they're going to be a playoff team. So we got to talk about Mitch, Dakota, Joshua, all these rumors. Over to you, though, Steele, because obviously Mitch Marner has been right there at the top. Everyone's talking about it. But this angle with Vegas, I'm starting to read into this a little bit. What do you think about the rumors that are not just rumors, it seems, where there's smoke, there's fire maybe with him going to Vegas?
I just don't think it's possible. This is one of those rumors where it's just not going to happen in my mind, and I can't see it happening because of Vegas's cap as well as Toronto's cap. Yeah. I mean, Vegas, with the cap raise going up $4 million up to 88 now this upcoming season, yeah, there's a little bit more room. Vegas has, I believe, 1.197 million in cap space right now. It's just not enough, because when you look at some of the assets they're looking to potentially move in a deal for Marner. Again, this is all rumor-based. There's been mock trades. There's been fake trades put out there about what could possibly happen. And the trade I've been seeing, and I would be more than happy to accept this trade, is Mitch Marner for Shea Theodore in a first-round pick. In my opinion, again, I would love to see that happen, just because we need to restructure, or the Toronto Maple Leafs need to restructure their blue line. And Shea Theodore is one of those guys who's still in his prime. He's 27 years old. When he's in the lineup, he is one of the best two-way defensemen in the game, in my opinion. And he would bring a lot of value to the blue line of the Toronto Maple Leafs. Again, you're losing Mitch Marner, but you're also getting a first-round pick in that process with Shea Theodore, which the Maple Leafs desperately need some draft picks as well. Unfortunately, there's just not enough room for the Vegas Golden Knights to accept a $10.9 million contract from the Toronto Maple Leafs in Mitch Marner, when they've got all these other guys on their roster, like Mark Stone with a $10 million cap hit, Jack Eichel with a $10 million, Mark Stone 9.5, Alex Pietrangelo 8.8, Noah Hannafin 7.3. The list continues to go on. It's just too much, in my opinion, to add another $10.9 million guy. I would like to see that rumor of, again, Shea Theodore and a first-round pick for Marner. Just not possible, though.
Look, this has been discussed, covered to the cows come home. But when news like this pops about a fantasy piece as relevant as Mitch Marner, I know it's tough, because everyone likes to throw shade at the Leafs. If it was any other player, we'd be talking about it too. So we just got to come on here and mention one of the biggest pieces of news. We try and keep you guys updated on everything in 30 minutes, Monday through Friday. You know what it is. We keep it tight. We try and get you everything that you need to know. And things are going on with this Toronto Maple Leafs franchise. So Mitch needs to be discussed, but perhaps even more interestingly, Steele, because I'm with you on everything you said. And it's sounding like as well from the Mitch Marner camp that he just wants to play out this next year and then figure it out.
Yeah.
So I could see that definitely happening. And this guy is a 90 to 100 point caliber player. So his fantasy value stays exactly where it's been from the last couple of seasons. He is still a stud. He shouldn't really be going much after the late second round or third round. If he is, that's a mistake. He puts up those points, and he is a fantasy offensive dynamo. Let's move on to Dakota Joshua and Nikita Zadorov, though, because those two players, Steele, not only do I think they're the perfect kind of makeup for the Toronto Maple Leafs that need a little bit more size. You mentioned the blue line restructuring. All these things have been covered. What hasn't been covered is bringing in those two guys into the Toronto Maple Leafs system. I see both of those guys, most definitely Dakota Joshua, Steele, who I know you've talked about at length. He becomes, for me, a very sneaky little week-to-week kind of a guy that I know worked out for you in a big way this year, throws the body, fills out those peripherals. I would love to have a look at him for my fantasy team next year. You and I keep talking about, your bench guys, the back end of the draft, how people can slack during that kind of situation. Dakota Joshua might be one of those guys that if he moves into Toronto's bottom six, starts getting a look on the third line, who knows who with. I'm going to start taking a look into some of these names, and that's what you got to do as a fantasy GM. But as a Toronto Maple Leafs fan, I love both of those names for this team.
Yeah, those are two guys that just fit into exactly what the Maple Leafs need moving forward to add to their superstar power up front and on the blue line. And I know Nikita Zadorov was one of the defensemen the Leafs were potentially looking at over the last year.
There with Treliving as well.
Yeah, before he got traded to the Vancouver Canucks. He's got the history with Treliving back in Calgary. And again, one of those guys that you can pick up on a flyer week-to-week basis, bi-weekly basis, when you need somebody to fill up a spot in your defensive lineup. 20 points last season. He doesn't get too many shots on net. He doesn't block too many pucks, I believe. Yeah, he doesn't block too many pucks. Only 68 blocks last year, but he's a physical presence. 177 hits. He gets the penalty minutes as well. And he is one of those defensemen that from time to time, he's able to surprise you with his skill set. He's able to use his skates and jump up in the rush, start shooting the puck, start scoring some goals. Nikita Zadorov does. And on the other end, Dakota Joshua would be amazing to have in the blue and white Leafs uniform. Career high 32 points. Career high 32 points, I believe. Yeah, 32 points in 63 games. He has only 84 shots this past season, but just like Nikita Zadorov, he brings that physical presence. 245 hits, 40 blocks, 84 penalty minutes, I believe he had. 60 penalty minutes he had this past season. And it's not even just the regular season. Look what he did in the postseason with the Vancouver Canucks.
Very effective for the Canucks.
10 points in 13 games. Another, the penalty, all the peripheral stats were banging out for this guy. He's one of those guys that you can move up and down the lineup when you need to. But he brings a lot of the physical presence that the Leafs need right now. And he was, again, one of those guys I talked a lot about last season, fantasy-wise.
Banger League beauty.
Yeah, Banger League beauty. He, I would keep him on my roster for, 3 weeks at a time, drop him, and then pick him back up, a month later. So another flyer guy that you can pick up whenever you really need. His fantasy value did rise, at some point in the season, I believe halfway through the season, and he was getting picked up a lot more frequently. But he's been showing a lot of skill set and what he's capable of doing.
Most definitely. Also, take a look at this stat. 18 goals for Dakota Joshua in 63 games last year. A plus 19, 5 game-winning goals steal. This guy, not only is he going to bring that edge, obviously, he can chip in the clutch with offense. And at 6'3", 200+ pounds, there's obviously a lot to like. We're going to keep covering these fantasy angles all summer long. Steele and I got our top 15 fantasy D-men. I know I've been teasing that and not coming through on it. We're going to come through for y'all along with the rest of today's episode talking about Game 4 Stanley Cup Final. An 8-piece from the Edmonton Oilers. but there are a number of McDavid statistics that I got to go off about. We'll talk about the Conn Smythe as well right after we talk about our friends from Policy Genius. Today's episode is brought to you by Policy Genius. Life is unpredictable, but a good life insurance plan gives your family financial safety to protect against some of life's unknowns. Policy Genius is America's leading online insurance marketplace that makes choosing the right policy for your family easy and quick. With Policy Genius, you can find insurance policies that start at just $292 a year for up to $1 million in coverage. Some options are 100% online that let you avoid, Steele, you know I hate them, unnecessary medical exams. Ain't nobody got time for that. Get peace of mind by finding the right life insurance policy with Policy Genius. Head to policygenius.com or click the link in the description to get your free life insurance quote and see how much you could save. That's policygenius.com.
And thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. Continue to hit the subscribe, the follow button, leave a 5-star review. We appreciate all that love and support you show us Monday through Friday. Make sure you also go check out Locked On Sports Today, though, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming from Fox Sports or ESPN. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or, like I said, the free Amazon Fire TV channel app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. Thank you so much for tuning in for today's episode with Flip and I. We really do appreciate it. Also, make sure you go check out our new Instagram account, Locked On Fantasy Hockey Pod, posting all that sweet content, posting all our big-time bets, posting all the sweet graphics throughout the Stanley Cup Finals, as well as throughout the offseason. Flip's been absolutely killing it, so appreciate you, brother, for doing that.
Got you.
Continuing, though, over to the Stanley Cup Finals.
Got to talk about
the Edmonton Oilers. They're alive. They are alive. You and I were on the phone before game time, and we both said, no. They're done. The Florida Panthers are cooking them. The Edmonton Oilers are done. They're getting swept. But no, they come out with an 8-1 8-piece over the Florida Panthers in Game 4. They survive, and they head back to Florida for Game 5. Were you surprised by how they came out and just like where was that for the first 3 games?
So I'm not surprised. I am surprised at no pushback from the Florida Panthers because we know what this team hangs its hat on, aside from just being a very balanced and good one. They're pesky. They're relentless. They don't make a lot of mistakes. They're very, very tough to play against. Yeah. And they're a resilient bunch. So to basically not see much punchback, and I know that there was a post here, could have gone the other way there. Matthew Tkachuk has been fairly invisible this series, Steele. Only 1 assist. So for me, he needs to be a difference maker, number 1. So am I surprised that the Edmonton Oilers came out like a house of fire? Not really. Am I surprised that kind of Florida ended up folding up? Little bit more surprised. Bob gets pulled. He allows 5. Wait, hold on. I had this written down properly. 4 goals on 16 shots. And look, Tkachuk is just too quiet. However, Steele, we were on the phone saying we thought they were done. I'll say this. Florida's not going to miss again. They head home. They're going to wrap this bad boy up. You and I can tee up Game 5. Tomorrow's episode, we'll talk about bets. We'll talk about a lot more fantasy angles the rest of the week. However, it's nice for Edmonton fans. Honestly, I'm happy for Canadian hockey fans. Think about this deal. Imagine going all year, going all the way to the Cup final and getting swept. You don't get 1 win to Selly in the Stanley Cup final. So I'm happy for Oilers fans, straight up and down. I'm glad that they got one. It's over. Florida always bounces back. Paul Maurice's team, his whole career, have always responded. They don't lose many games in a row. And take a look at Bob in this postseason. I'll throw it right back to you. After losses in this postseason, every single bad loss for Bob, he allowed 4 goals against the Bruins in Game 1, 5 goals against the Rangers in Game 3, and actually back against the Lightning, also Game 4, 6 goals, bounced back with a win in every single one. So I'm going to just spit it out. It was nice for Edmonton, but honestly, and we'll talk about McDavid Magic in a hot minute, it's over, headed back to Florida. They are going to shut it down. You'll see Bob respond. You'll see the whole lineup respond. And nice for Edmonton, but it's over in the next game. Game 5, Florida.
A bounce back from Bob is almost guaranteed. It is guaranteed, it seems like, this postseason. And look, I'm with you right there as well. The Florida Panthers are not going to miss this opportunity again, especially going back home in Florida. And this, I just want to, connect this to the NBA Finals right now. The Boston Celtics were up 3-0. Dallas Mavericks come out for Game 4 and absolutely cook them. It's 3-1 in this situation for both teams. But honestly, it seems like both of those teams, the Boston Celtics and Florida Panthers, sort of like just let them have Game 4 so they could potentially win the finals.
A lot of weird parallels with the NBA Finals.
A lot of weird parallels.
And Tatum as well.
Yeah, Kachuk and Tatum going to the same high school. They got the pictures floating around social media. But look, I think both teams definitely sold Game 4 so they could win the championship at home in their own arena with their own fans. So I think both teams are going to capitalize in Game 5, Boston Celtics and, of course, the Florida Panthers. Florida Panthers, though, like you said, Matthew Tkachuk has been a little bit of a ghost out there this finals, while other players, especially Bob, we're going to talk about Conn Smythe Trophy odds very, very soon. But let's talk about Connor McDavid and what he's been doing this postseason. Regardless of the outcome of the Stanley Cup Finals, he's put himself, again, up in the conversation with the great one. I believe he is now 6th all-time with the most points through a postseason, but he also has the most assists in a postseason, passing the great one.
Steele, that right there, let's just pause for a second because, yes, his team is on the ropes. And if they lose this, which it's looking very likely that they will, they're alive. I'm not trying to poo-poo anything. When you read into the betting angles like we do and you see what Paul Maurice's teams have done over the course of his career when they lose a big game, and that's not just a 3-2 loss, when they get embarrassed and they're heading home, I just really don't see it for Edmonton. Can they still win? Of course. So will it take some of the shine off of how historically good Connor McDavid is right now? And it might. It will, obviously. It's not the same. However, looking at all of these statistics, Steele, including the one that you just reamed off, the most assists in a postseason in NHL history? We have to take a full pause moment. I have a framed, signed McDavid photo over my shoulder. He is wearing a Team Canada jersey. It's in gold Sharpie. I got it on a $35 Super Bowl square. And if this guy keeps breaking records, I was considering selling that bad boy because he's not in Toronto Maple Leafs colors, and this room is a little bit blue and white. That thing is not going off that wall, I don't think, because this is really special, and I'll leave it at this. We can go to break, and we'll talk about Conn Smythe or whatever you want.
Yeah.
After Connor McDavid's 38 points in this playoff year, only Gretzky and Lemieux have scored more in a postseason. And that right there is all that needs to be said, because when he shifts it into that next gear, I've said this before, he's not a half step or one step. He is 2 steps faster than the next closest guy on the ice. And I don't think that's ever happened in the history of this game.
It has been absolutely...
His skating is just unreal. I could watch him skate all night.
It is absolutely incredible watching him skate and just use his feet to blow by people. Look, Connor McDavid, 6th on the all-time scoring postseason list right now, behind, like you said, Wayne Gretzky, Mario Lemieux, with 38 points. But he holds the record now with most assists in a postseason with 32 assists, and he could add a couple more continuing into Game 5 against the Florida Panthers in Florida. But talking about the Florida Panthers, talking about the Edmonton Oilers, let's continue this conversation after the break about the Conn Smythe Trophy odds, because that is something to really dive into. And
I got a couple more stats for the head tops as well, Steve.
All right, a couple more stats from Connor McDavid after the break. Then we'll get into the Conn Smythe Trophy odds. But first, this episode is also brought to you by FanDuel. Summertime means baseball. The NBA finals are up. The NHL finals are up and more. And you can bet on it all on FanDuel. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 you can use to bet on everything from the finals MVP, which we're going to be talking about soon, to who's going to hit it out of the park in the MLB. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and add a big win to your summer bucket list. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Once again, thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. Continue to hit the subscribe, the follow button, leave a 5-star review. We appreciate all that love and support you show us Monday through Friday. Flip, my guy, over to you.
Yes.
Continuing with the hot stats over here and the hot facts.
Yeah.
Let's have it.
Well, I just I gotta throw one more out there. You know me. Also, shout out to NHL PR on X, Twitter. That is a solid follow. If you're not following that one, tap in. McDavid delivers when facing elimination once again. Connor McDavid is the first player since 1987 to record 4 points in a cup final game facing elimination. This is kind of now Steele, and I could continue to read into these. We talk about fantasy on this show, but when he does what he is doing right now, it transcends everything. This is just magical hockey, and that's what you have to really enjoy. And honestly, I'm not a butthurt Leafs fan. I was straight up happy for the Edmonton Oilers fan base to have something to celebrate. That barn was rocking on Saturday night in Edmonton, and it's one of those things that I sit here and I just honestly think how amazing it would have been to be in that building on Saturday night and then have a performance like that from the Oilers. Got to show a little bit of love to the bottom six very quickly. Matthias Janmark was sensational. Adam Henrique was really good.
Brown was great too.
And there you go. So you have this team literally firing on all cylinders. And I know you didn't see the best from the Florida Panthers. And you have seen their best over the first 3 games, just shutting down everything. You saw the best of the Florida Panthers. Now you've seen the best of the Edmonton Oilers. And Connor McDavid said it. When they play their game, they know they can hang with Florida. It's just, can they do that 3 more times? I'm going to go with no, but you just saw the best. And what happens when they get a balanced attack? They are the best offensive team in the league, and it's not actually close.
I think the one thing that has bugged me the most so far about this Stanley Cup Finals, especially from the Edmonton Oilers point of view, is that they're actually getting some really good goaltending from Stuart Skinner in all 3 games. And I know game 3 was a little bit of a lopsided game as well when they just kind of broke out. Yeah, when they just broke out in the second period and scored 3 straight goals and kind of just put the Edmonton Oilers out of their misery at that point. But the first 4 games, actually the entire Stanley Cup Finals, Stuart Skinner's been giving his best. So it's been very unfortunate that especially in the first 2 or actually the first 3 games, the Edmonton Oilers were incapable of scoring goals and helping their team get over that hump. But again, got to give a shout out to Stuart Skinner because he's been playing a lot better than what we expected him to play this postseason or this Stanley Cup Finals from what we've seen him doing in the first 3 rounds. But moving forward, though, if you're okay with it, Flip, Conn Smythe Trophy odds, I've got them up on my phone right now. And for me, there's obviously the clear-cut favorite, who is the favorite right now, Sergei Bobrovsky. But I'll throw it over to you first.
You sure?
What's the smart pick, but what's the pick that you're like, okay, like there's some odds here, there's some juice, and maybe a 5 or 10er could hit out.
Here's the thing. First and foremost, just to touch on Stuart Skinner very quickly, this is one of those situations that I think you and I have highlighted very nicely over the last couple of weeks, how playoff performances really are going to be those lingering memories when you go into the fantasy draft season. Yeah. Okay, how did that? Okay, we know Chris Kreider was hot. These kind of things. We know Elias Pettersson struggled. Stuart Skinner has been up and down at points of this playoffs going, okay, he looks really good. I'm definitely looking at Stuart Skinner next fantasy draft. Then you go, okay, whoa. I'm going to be laying off Stuart Skinner right now. I think he's proving that he is a very valuable fantasy asset, a goaltender that next year playing on this Edmonton Oilers team, at the very least, Steele, is going to get you a ton of wins in that category. So I just wanted to show some love for the fantasy side of Stuart Skinner, who I think over the last couple of games is once again increasing his value quite obviously. Look, these odds are going to shift in a major way if you see another big game from the Edmonton Oilers, because right now you're looking at it like Connor McDavid at plus 800, and this is where I'm going to go for the obvious angle and the value. Connor McDavid at plus 800, if he even gets 2 more assists and continues to go past Wayne Gretzky and Mario Lemieux in these names, and they get game 5, that plus 800 Steele is going to go right down the toilet to about plus 350. So I got to take a look at Connor McDavid, because if somehow, and the last team to do this, by the way, Steele, very nice little bow on this episode, the last team to turn it around from 3-0 in a Stanley Cup final, You may have heard of them, the 1966 Toronto Maple Leafs. So there we go, pal. But if they do manage to do that, Connor McDavid, it's not a if, he will be the Conn Smythe winner of this Stanley Cup final. If somehow they imagine to pull it out at plus 800, a 20 bet right now, you'll be thanking me later.
Yeah, I mean, that's the go-to one for me, especially with the juice at plus 800. And like you said, if they figure out a way to come back from this 3-0 deficit and win 4 in a row and somehow win the Stanley Cup Finals, Connor McDavid's going to win it hands down easily. Yeah. It's going to him. And
yeah, I don't see it. So if I were to put anything in a parlay, it'd probably be Alexander Barkov. But if you're looking at the value to answer your question, it's got to be McJesus.
You think Barkov's going to win it?
I just mean after McDavid, if I'm looking to make some, I'm going to make some value bet at plus 135. I know how good Bob's been, but he also just got pumped. So if he plays another bad game, Barkov's been sensational on every single minute he's on the ice, and Bob just got pulled. So that will affect the decision-making for the trophy, but that's just me, Steele, because obviously Bob's been standing on his head as well. So this is one of those situations that when you only really have 3 players to look at, it's going to get a bit dicey. But look, Connor McDavid at plus 800, if I'm going to do anything here, would probably be the move for like a 15 or a 20 piece for fun and pray that something crazy happens.
Yeah, obviously, as the games continue on, if they somehow get to Game 6 and Game 7, these odds are going to shift, like you said. But for me, as it stands right now, we've both agreed that it's going back to Florida, and Florida's not missing another opportunity.
Yeah.
So
there you go.
We're both going with Game 5 victory, and the Stanley Cup Finals is going to be over once Game 5 is complete.
So there you go.
I'm going with Sergei Bobrovsky at minus 130. I know it's not the highest odds.
It's a smart play.
Again, you've got Alexander Barkov at plus 135 and then Connor McDavid at plus 800. Regardless, though, let's say the Florida Panthers win and you've got between Bobrovsky and Barkov. I know they've both been stellar. I'm going with Sergei Bobrovsky just with how he's played in this Stanley Cup Finals right now.
So I don't have the list up, and let's just leave it at this one for the episode. You know I like to say that. I know Jean-Sebastian Giguère won it in the year that the Ducks lost. So sometimes the losing team does get the Conn Smythe winner. It's happened before. I know not very often. But imagine the Edmonton Oilers get Game 5 somehow. McDavid has 3 or 4 more points. And maybe they even just lose in Game 6. Do you think possibly somehow he gets the Conn Smythe in a losing effort?
Oh, it's so weird to say that. Yeah, it's so weird.
Because we're just getting hypothetical here at the end of the episode. And look, Steele, they only score 1 time on 6 chances on the power play. So we know they still need to be better on special teams. And for me, like all of the analysts were saying, checked all the boxes, big guns going, special teams going. For me, getting 1 goal on 6 chances when your power play is supposed to be as good as it is, I don't think that's checking all the boxes, because 1 for 6 for me, given you have all of those studs, that's kind of disappointing. But anyway, now we're just spitballing. Game 5 tee up, tomorrow's episode, and top 15 D-men coming up at the end of the week.
Coming up for sure. Top 15 defensemen. You're going to get all of those defensemen. We're going to do a top 15 goaltenders. Who should be taken off the board first? You're going to get it all this offseason, especially with free agency coming up, the draft coming up, everything this offseason. Stay tuned to the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast. Thank you so much for making it your first listen every single day. Once again, make sure you go check out Locked On Sports Today, the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, or you can also find it on the free Amazon Fire TV channel app. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. And once again, thank you so much for tuning in for today's episode with Flip and I. Have a great day. Good luck with all your bets tonight, and we shall see you back here again tomorrow.